Sarah Martinez had been working as a flight attendant for Delta Airlines for 12 years, but she had never experienced a morning quite like this one. As she arrived at Atlanta International Airport at 5:30 a.m., the autumn air was crisp and the terminal buzzed with early morning travelers. Flight 2847 to Los Angeles was scheduled to depart at 7:15 a.m., and Sarah always prided herself on being perfectly prepared for every journey. The Boeing 767 sat gleaming on the tarmac as Sarah and her crew of 4 other flight attendants began their pre-flight preparations. Captain Robert Chen, a veteran pilot with over 20 years of experience, conducted his routine aircraft inspection with his co-pilot, First Officer Michael Torres. Sarah noticed that Captain Chen seemed slightly more tired than usual during their brief crew meeting, rubbing his temples and mentioning he hadn't slept well the previous night. However, this wasn't uncommon in their profession, where irregular schedules and jet lag were constant companions. As passengers began boarding, Sarah fell into her familiar rhythm of welcoming travelers, helping them stow their luggage, and ensuring everyone was comfortable. The flight was nearly full with 184 passengers, including several families with young children heading to Los Angeles for vacation, business travelers with their laptops already open, and elderly couples embarking on what appeared to be well-planned trips to visit family on the West Coast. Among the passengers was Dr. Amanda Foster, a cardiologist from Emory University Hospital, who was traveling to Los Angeles for a medical conference. She had chosen an aisle seat in row 12, hoping to stretch her legs during the 5-hour flight. Nearby sat James Wellington, a retired paramedic who was visiting his daughter in California. Neither of them knew that their medical expertise would soon become crucial to everyone aboard. The takeoff proceeded smoothly as Captain Chen expertly guided the aircraft into the morning sky. Sarah began her usual service routine, starting with the distribution of beverages and snacks. She had always been known among her colleagues for her attention to detail and genuine care for passenger comfort. Her supervisors often praised her ability to remain calm under pressure and her skill at handling difficult situations with grace and professionalism. As the plane reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, Sarah noticed that Captain Chen had requested coffee 3 times within the first hour of flight. This was unusual, as most pilots typically had 1 cup during the initial cruise phase. When she brought him his 4th cup around 9:30 a.m., she observed that his hands seemed slightly shaky, and he appeared to be sweating despite the cool temperature in the cockpit. Captain Chen assured her he was fine, mentioning that he had consumed too much caffeine the previous day and was trying to ward off a headache. The flight continued smoothly for another hour, with passengers settling into their routines of reading, sleeping, or working on their devices. Sarah and her team served the complimentary snack service efficiently, and the cabin atmosphere was relaxed and peaceful. The weather conditions were excellent, with clear skies and minimal turbulence, making for what appeared to be a routine transcontinental flight. However, Sarah's trained eye continued to notice small details that seemed slightly off. During her regular checks to the cockpit, she observed that Captain Chen was drinking coffee more frequently than she had ever seen from any pilot. By 10:45 a.m., he had consumed 7 cups, and each time she delivered a fresh cup, he seemed more anxious and restless. His conversation with First Officer Torres appeared more intense than usual, though their voices remained professional and controlled. First Officer Torres had also begun to notice changes in Captain Chen's behavior. The captain was fidgeting with his instruments more than necessary, and seemed to be having difficulty focusing on routine communications with air traffic control. However, Chen's responses remained technically correct and professional, giving no obvious indication to ground control that anything was amiss. As they approached the halfway point of their journey, flying over the vast expanse of the American Midwest, Sarah made her 8th trip to the cockpit with yet another cup of coffee for Captain Chen. This time, she decided to gently inquire about his well-being, asking if he needed anything else or if he was feeling all right. Captain Chen responded that he was experiencing some discomfort, but insisted it was merely fatigue and stress from a busy schedule. The passengers remained unaware of any potential issues, continuing their activities in the comfortable cabin environment. Children played quietly with their tablets. Business travelers typed away on their laptops, and many passengers had settled in for naps during the smooth flight. The Boeing 767's engines hummed steadily as they maintained their westward course toward Los Angeles. Sarah returned to the galley area, where her colleague Jennifer Walsh noticed her concerned expression. When Jennifer asked what was troubling her, Sarah shared her observations about Captain Chen's unusual coffee consumption and apparent nervousness. Both flight attendants agreed to monitor the situation more closely, though neither wanted to alarm passengers or create unnecessary concern. As the digital clock in the galley showed 11:15 a.m., they were approximately halfway through their journey, flying over Kansas at 35,000 feet. The aircraft's autopilot system maintained their course perfectly, and all instruments showed normal readings. However, the tension in the cockpit was beginning to build as Captain Chen continued to show signs of increasing discomfort, setting the stage for the dramatic events that would soon unfold and test everyone's training, professionalism, and ability to handle an unprecedented crisis at altitude. At 11:32 a.m., while flying over the Colorado Rockies, Sarah was preparing the lunch service when she heard the cockpit call button chime insistently. Captain Chen's voice came through the intercom, requesting immediate coffee delivery, but his tone sounded strained and urgent. Sarah quickly prepared a fresh cup and hurried to the cockpit, where she found Captain Chen gripping the armrests of his pilot seat, his face pale and covered with perspiration. First Officer Torres looked up at Sarah with concern in his eyes as Captain Chen took the coffee with visibly trembling hands. The captain attempted to maintain his composure, but Sarah could see he was struggling. His breathing appeared labored, and he kept adjusting his position in the seat, as if trying to find relief from some unseen discomfort. When Sarah asked directly if he needed medical attention, Captain Chen firmly declined, insisting he just needed the caffeine to stay alert. Sarah returned to the cabin with growing unease, sharing her observations with Jennifer and the other flight attendants. They decided to discreetly identify any medical professionals among the passengers without causing alarm. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, First Officer Torres was becoming increasingly worried about his captain's condition. Chen was now consuming coffee almost continuously, finishing one cup and immediately requesting another. Dr. Amanda Foster had noticed the unusual frequency of the flight attendant's trips to the cockpit and the subtle changes in the crew's demeanor. As a cardiologist, she was trained to recognize signs of cardiac distress, and something about the situation was triggering her professional instincts. When Sarah approached her discreetly to inquire about her medical background, Dr. Foster immediately understood the gravity of the situation. At 11:55 a.m., Captain Chen called for his 11th cup of coffee since takeoff. This time, when Sarah entered the cockpit, she found him clutching his chest and struggling to maintain his professional composure. First Officer Torres was clearly alarmed, repeatedly asking if the captain needed assistance. Chen continued to deny any serious problem, but his symptoms were becoming impossible to ignore. Sarah made a crucial decision that would later be credited with saving many lives. Instead of simply delivering the coffee and leaving, she remained in the cockpit and began a gentle but persistent conversation with Captain Chen about his symptoms. She had completed extensive medical training as part of her flight attendant certification and recognized the potential signs of cardiac distress. The captain's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next few minutes. His coffee cup sat untouched as he pressed both hands against his chest, his breathing becoming increasingly shallow and rapid. Sweat was now streaming down his face despite the cool cockpit temperature. First Officer Torres made the critical decision to contact air traffic control and declare a medical emergency, while simultaneously beginning preparations to assume full control of the aircraft. Dr. Foster, having been briefed by the flight crew about the situation, made her way to the cockpit with James Wellington, the retired paramedic. The narrow cockpit space made it challenging for them to properly assess Captain Chen, but both medical professionals immediately recognized the classic signs of an acute myocardial infarction. Dr. Foster began taking his vital signs while Wellington prepared to assist with any necessary interventions. Captain Chen, despite his training and years of experience, was fighting not only his physical symptoms, but also the mental struggle of admitting he could no longer safely pilot the aircraft. The responsibility he felt for the 184 passengers and crew members weighed heavily on his mind, even as his body was failing him. His repeated request for coffee had been his attempt to self-medicate and maintain alertness, not realizing that caffeine could potentially worsen his cardiac condition. First Officer Torres, though experienced, had never faced a situation where the captain became completely incapacitated during flight. His training kicked in as he took full control of the aircraft, contacted air traffic control to explain the situation, and began planning for an emergency landing. The nearest suitable airport was Denver International, still over 200 miles away, requiring careful navigation and coordination with ground control. Sarah coordinated with her fellow flight attendants to manage the cabin situation without causing panic among the passengers. They made announcements about minor delays and technical adjustments while carefully monitoring passenger reactions. Most travelers remained unaware of the serious medical emergency unfolding in the cockpit, though some observant passengers began to notice the increased activity and serious expressions on the crew members' faces. Dr. Foster quickly determined that Captain Chen was experiencing a significant heart attack and needed immediate medical intervention. Working in the cramped cockpit space, she administered aspirin from the aircraft's medical kit, while Wellington monitored the captain's pulse and breathing. They established that Chen was conscious but in severe distress, requiring constant monitoring and preparation for potential cardiac arrest. The aircraft continued flying smoothly on autopilot, while First Officer Torres coordinated with Denver Air Traffic Control for priority landing clearance. Emergency medical services were being dispatched to meet the aircraft upon landing, and the control tower was clearing the runway for immediate approach. The professionalism and quick thinking of the entire crew were becoming evident as they managed multiple critical tasks simultaneously. As they approached 12:30 p.m., Captain Chen's condition reached a critical point. His coffee consumption, which had started as an attempt to stay alert, had ended with him unable to even hold a cup. Dr. Foster and Wellington worked together to keep him stable, while Sarah continued to be the vital communication link between the medical team and First Officer Torres, who needed to focus entirely on safely flying the aircraft and coordinating the emergency landing. At 12:45 p.m., Captain Chen's condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. Dr. Foster noticed his pulse becoming irregular and his breathing more labored, indicating that his heart attack was progressing to a more dangerous phase. Working within the confines of the cockpit, she and James Wellington had limited space and equipment to provide the level of care the captain urgently needed. The aircraft's medical kit, while comprehensive for basic emergencies, was not equipped for advanced cardiac intervention. First Officer Torres was now managing the enormous responsibility of piloting the Boeing 767 while coordinating with multiple air traffic control centers. Denver International Airport had cleared all runways and assembled emergency medical teams, including cardiac specialists who were standing by. The control tower was in constant communication, providing updated weather conditions and runway information while emergency vehicles positioned themselves for immediate response. Sarah had become the crucial link between the cockpit crisis and cabin management. She needed to prepare the passengers for an emergency landing without revealing the full extent of the medical emergency, as panic could create additional dangerous complications. Her years of training in crisis management were being put to the ultimate test as she balanced transparency with maintaining calm among the 184 passengers aboard. The challenge of treating Captain Chen in the cockpit space proved increasingly difficult as his symptoms intensified. Dr. Foster was concerned about the possibility of cardiac arrest, which would require immediate CPR and potentially defibrillation. The aircraft's automated external defibrillator was located in the main cabin, and moving an unconscious patient from the cockpit would be extremely challenging, given the narrow doorway and limited space. Wellington suggested they prepare for the possibility of having to move Captain Chen to the cabin area where they would have more room to work and access to additional medical equipment. However, this would mean removing him from his pilot seat during a critical phase of the emergency landing preparation, creating additional complications for First Officer Torres, who might need his captain's input on aircraft systems. Meanwhile, passengers were beginning to sense that something unusual was happening. The frequent movement of crew members, hushed conversations, and subtle changes in the aircraft's flight pattern were noticed by more observant travelers. Sarah and her team worked to reassure passengers while making discreet preparations for emergency landing procedures, including reviewing safety equipment locations and identifying passengers who might assist in case of evacuation. Dr. Foster made the difficult decision to administer additional medication from the medical kit to help stabilize Captain Chen's heart rhythm. Her experience treating cardiac patients in hospital settings was invaluable, but the unique challenges of providing emergency care at 35,000 feet in a confined space tested her adaptability and clinical skills. Every decision had to be made quickly and with limited diagnostic tools. First Officer Torres received clearance to begin descent toward Denver International Airport, starting the carefully orchestrated process of bringing the aircraft down from cruising altitude. The descent required precise coordination between engine power, altitude changes, and approach speed, all while maintaining constant communication with air traffic control and monitoring the captain's deteriorating condition through updates from the medical team. The physical demands of treating Captain Chen in the cockpit were taking their toll on both Dr. Foster and Wellington. The cramped space forced them to work in awkward positions, and the aircraft's movement during descent added to the complexity of providing medical care. They had successfully moved the captain to a more accessible position, but his condition remained critical and unstable. Sarah announced to passengers that they would be making an unscheduled landing in Denver due to a medical emergency, without specifying that the emergency involved the pilot. Her calm, professional delivery helped maintain order in the cabin, though she could see concern and curiosity on many faces. Parents pulled their children closer, business travelers looked up from their laptops, and nervous conversations began spreading throughout the cabin. The coordination between the cockpit, medical team, and cabin crew reached a critical point as they approached Denver airspace. First Officer Torres needed constant updates on Captain Chen's condition to determine if additional medical decisions might affect landing procedures. Dr. Foster provided regular reports while continuing to monitor vital signs and prepare for potential cardiac complications during the descent and landing phases. Captain Chen, despite his severe condition, occasionally regained enough consciousness to provide brief input about aircraft systems and landing procedures. His dedication to passenger safety remained evident even as he battled the heart attack, though Dr. Foster was increasingly concerned about his ability to remain conscious through the emergency landing. The coffee that had sustained him earlier was now completely forgotten as his body fought the cardiac crisis. As they descended through 20,000 feet, Wellington noticed signs that Captain Chen's condition might be stabilizing slightly, though he remained in critical condition requiring constant monitoring. The combination of medication, oxygen from the cockpit supply, and the gradual reduction in altitude seemed to provide some relief, but both medical professionals knew the next hour would be crucial for the captain's survival. The Denver Airport Emergency Response Team was fully activated, with cardiac specialists, paramedics, and emergency room physicians standing by on the ground. Fire and rescue vehicles were positioned along the runway, and a direct route to the nearest cardiac care center had been cleared. The collaboration between aviation professionals and medical experts was creating the best possible scenario for Captain Chen's treatment and the safe landing of all passengers and crew members aboard. Flight 2847. At 1:15 p.m., as Flight 2847 descended through 15,000 feet toward Denver International Airport, Captain Chen suddenly lost consciousness completely. Dr. Foster immediately checked his pulse and found it weak and irregular, indicating his heart was struggling to maintain adequate circulation. Wellington helped position the captain to ensure his airway remained clear while Dr. Foster prepared to begin more aggressive treatment measures if his condition continued to deteriorate. First, Officer Torres now faced the full weight of landing the Boeing 767 entirely on his own, with an unconscious captain and 184 passengers depending on his skills and training. His years of experience as a co-pilot had prepared him for this scenario theoretically, but the reality of the situation tested every aspect of his professional competence. Air traffic control provided continuous support, clearing all other aircraft from the area and giving him priority handling for the emergency approach. The medical situation in the cockpit had reached a critical point where Dr. Foster needed to make decisions that could mean the difference between life and death for Captain Chen. Working with the limited equipment available, she administered emergency cardiac medication, while Wellington monitored breathing and circulation. The confined space made CPR nearly impossible, so they focused on maintaining stability until landing when advanced medical care would be available. Thus, Sarah coordinated with her fellow flight attendants to prepare the cabin for emergency landing procedures while keeping passengers informed without creating panic. She announced that they were experiencing a medical emergency requiring immediate landing in Denver, and that everyone should review safety card instructions and prepare for possible emergency evacuation. Her calm professionalism helped maintain order despite the obvious tension among passengers. The descent toward Denver continued smoothly as First Officer Torres demonstrated exceptional skill in managing the aircraft single-handedly. He communicated with air traffic control while monitoring multiple instrument systems, calculating approach speeds, and preparing for landing under extreme pressure. His training at the airline's flight academy had included scenarios like this, but the real-world application demanded every bit of his knowledge and experience. Dr. Foster noticed that Captain Chen's vital signs were showing slight improvement as they descended to lower altitude, where the aircraft's cabin pressure more closely matched ground-level atmospheric conditions. However, he remained unconscious and in critical condition, requiring constant monitoring and ready intervention if cardiac arrest occurred. The oxygen supply from the cockpit emergency system was helping maintain his blood oxygen levels. Passengers throughout the cabin were now fully aware that a serious emergency was in progress. Many were quietly praying. Others were calling loved ones using their cell phones as they descended low enough for signal reception, and parents were explaining to children that everything would be okay. The professionalism of the flight crew was evident as they moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts and preparing for landing while maintaining reassuring attitudes. Wellington's experience as a paramedic proved invaluable as he assisted Dr. Foster with monitoring Captain Chen's condition and preparing for the transition to ground-based emergency medical care. He had responded to countless cardiac emergencies during his career, but never at 35,000 feet in an aircraft cockpit. His ability to adapt his skills to the unique environment was crucial in keeping the captain stable. First Officer Torres received final approach clearance from Denver Tower as emergency vehicles took their positions along the runway. Fire trucks, ambulances, and specialized medical equipment were ready for immediate response. The coordination between aviation, authorities, and emergency medical services demonstrated the extensive planning and training that prepares for exactly these types of critical situations. As they approached 5,000 feet, Sarah made final preparations for landing, ensuring all passengers were secured and ready for possible emergency evacuation. She had moved several passengers with medical training closer to emergency exits and identified strong individuals who could assist elderly or disabled passengers if evacuation became necessary. Her crew worked together seamlessly, demonstrating the value of their extensive emergency training. The aircraft's instruments showed all systems functioning normally, despite the medical crisis in the cockpit. First Officer Torres maintained perfect control of the descent profile while constantly receiving updates about Captain Chen's condition from Dr. Foster. The teamwork between aviation professionals and medical experts was creating the best possible outcome under extremely challenging circumstances. Captain Chen briefly regained consciousness as they passed through 3,000 feet, providing a moment of hope for his recovery. Dr. Foster quickly assessed his awareness and found him responsive, but disoriented and still in considerable distress. His first concern, even in his weakened state, was for the safety of the passengers and the status of the aircraft, demonstrating the dedication that had made him a respected captain. The final approach phase began as First Officer Torres aligned the aircraft with Denver's main runway, while emergency crews stood ready to respond immediately upon landing. Dr. Foster and Wellington prepared to quickly transition Captain Chen to advanced cardiac care, knowing that the next few minutes would be critical for his survival. The coffee that had marked the beginning of this crisis hours earlier was now completely irrelevant compared to the life-and-death struggle taking place in the cockpit. Denver International Airport had temporarily suspended all other flight operations to focus entirely on the emergency landing of Flight 2847. The control tower maintained constant communication with First Officer Torres, providing weather updates, runway conditions, and coordination with emergency response teams. Everything was in place for what everyone hoped would be a successful landing and immediate medical intervention for Captain Chen. At 1:48 p.m., First Officer Torres executed a textbook emergency landing at Denver International Airport, bringing the Boeing 767 safely to the ground despite the incredible pressure of the situation. The landing was smooth and precise, demonstrating exceptional piloting skills under extreme circumstances. Emergency vehicles immediately surrounded the aircraft as it rolled to a stop on the designated runway, with paramedics and cardiac specialists ready to board within seconds of the engines shutting down. Dr. Foster and Wellington had prepared Captain Chen for immediate transfer to advanced medical care, maintaining his vital signs throughout the descent and landing. The moment the aircraft doors opened, a specialized cardiac emergency team boarded and took over his care, quickly assessing his condition and preparing him for transport to the nearest cardiac care center. The seamless transition from aircraft medical care to ground-based emergency treatment demonstrated the effectiveness of the coordinated response. Sarah and her flight crew managed the passenger evacuation with remarkable efficiency, ensuring that everyone disembarked safely while allowing medical personnel immediate access to Captain Chen. Passengers were directed to the terminal where they were provided with information about flight rebooking and support services. Many passengers approached the crew members to express their gratitude and amazement at how professionally the emergency had been handled. Captain Chen was conscious but weak as he was transferred to the ambulance, surrounded by cardiac specialists who immediately began advanced treatment protocols. Dr. Foster provided a detailed briefing to the emergency medical team about the treatments she had administered during flight and the progression of his symptoms. Her quick thinking and medical expertise during the crisis had undoubtedly saved his life and prevented a much more tragic outcome. The investigation into the incident began immediately, with Federal Aviation Administration officials interviewing crew members and reviewing flight data to understand exactly what had occurred. First Officer Torres was praised for his exceptional handling of the aircraft and his decision-making under pressure. His ability to safely land the plane while managing the medical emergency was recognized as extraordinary piloting skill. Within hours, news of the dramatic emergency landing spread through aviation and medical communities, highlighting the importance of having medical professionals among passengers and the critical role of flight attendants in emergency situations. Sarah's observations and persistence in monitoring Captain Chen's condition were credited with early recognition of the cardiac emergency, allowing for timely medical intervention and successful emergency landing coordination. Captain Chen underwent emergency cardiac surgery at Denver's Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital, where surgeons successfully performed angioplasty to open blocked arteries in his heart. The medical team confirmed that he had experienced a significant myocardial infarction and that the quick response and medical care he received during flight had prevented potentially fatal complications. His prognosis for recovery was positive, though it would require extensive rehabilitation. Dr. Foster and Wellington were recognized by the airline and medical authorities for their life-saving actions during the flight. Their willingness to provide emergency medical care in the challenging environment of an aircraft cockpit demonstrated the importance of having trained medical professionals available during commercial flights. Both emphasized that Sarah's early recognition of the emergency was crucial to the successful outcome. The passengers of Flight 2847 were eventually accommodated on alternative flights to Los Angeles, with the airline providing full support and compensation for the delays and inconvenience. Many passengers wrote letters of appreciation to the crew members, expressing their admiration for the professionalism and care they had witnessed during the emergency. Several mentioned feeling safer knowing that such skilled and dedicated professionals were responsible for their well-being. First, Officer Torres was commended by the airline and aviation authorities for his exceptional performance during the emergency. His ability to take complete control of the aircraft while coordinating with medical personnel and air traffic control demonstrated the highest levels of professional competence. The successful landing was used as a case study in aviation training programs to illustrate proper emergency response procedures. Sarah received recognition from her airline for her crucial role in identifying the medical emergency and coordinating between the medical team and flight crew. Her attention to detail in noticing Captain Chen's unusual coffee consumption and symptoms was highlighted as an example of how flight attendants serve as the first line of defense in recognizing and responding to in-flight emergencies. The aircraft itself was thoroughly inspected and returned to service after confirming that all systems had functioned properly throughout the emergency. The incident highlighted the importance of having multiple qualified pilots on commercial flights and the effectiveness of current emergency response protocols. Aviation safety experts used the case to reinforce training programs for similar medical emergency scenarios. Captain Chen's excessive coffee consumption, which had initially been his attempt to stay alert, became an important learning point for aviation medical professionals about the signs of cardiac distress and the potential effects of stimulants on heart conditions. The incident led to enhanced training for flight crews in recognizing cardiac emergencies and improved protocols for managing medical situations involving essential crew members. The Denver International Airport emergency response was also praised for their rapid and coordinated reaction to the medical emergency. The seamless coordination between air traffic control, emergency medical services, and hospital facilities demonstrated the effectiveness of established emergency protocols. Their preparation and response became a model for other airports in handling similar critical situations involving aircraft medical emergencies. 6 months after the dramatic emergency landing, Captain Robert Chen returned to active flight duty following extensive cardiac rehabilitation and medical clearance from aviation medical authorities. His recovery had been remarkable, aided by the quick medical intervention he received during the flight and the excellent cardiac care at Denver Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital. The experience had given him a new perspective on life and a deeper appreciation for the dedication of his fellow crew members and medical professionals. Sarah Martinez was promoted to lead flight attendant and became an instructor in the airline's emergency response training program, sharing her experience with new flight attendants about the importance of observing passenger and crew member behavior for signs of medical distress. Her story became a centerpiece of training curricula, emphasizing how attention to detail and persistence in following instincts can save lives in critical situations. Dr. Amanda Foster was invited to join an advisory committee for aviation medical emergency protocols, working with airlines and medical authorities to improve in-flight medical response procedures. Her experience treating a cardiac emergency in the confined space of an aircraft cockpit provided valuable insights for developing better medical equipment configurations and treatment protocols for similar situations in commercial aviation. First Officer Michael Torres was promoted to captain and received numerous awards for his exceptional performance during the emergency. His successful single-handed landing of the Boeing 767 became a case study in aviation schools worldwide, demonstrating the importance of thorough training and the ability to perform under extreme pressure. He often spoke at aviation conferences about the experience and the teamwork that made the successful outcome possible. James Wellington, the retired paramedic, was honored by emergency medical services organizations for his volunteer assistance during the flight emergency. His willingness to help and his professional expertise in a completely unexpected situation highlighted the value of having diverse medical skills available among airline passengers. He became an advocate for encouraging medical professionals to identify themselves to flight crews when traveling. The relationship between the crew members who shared this intense experience remained strong, with annual reunions to commemorate the anniversary of Flight 2847's emergency landing. These gatherings became opportunities to reflect on how the crisis had changed their perspectives on teamwork, professional responsibility, and the importance of remaining calm under pressure. Each participant credited the others with contributing to the successful outcome. Captain Chen's coffee consumption habits changed dramatically after his recovery, as his cardiologist had explained how excessive caffeine might have contributed to his cardiac episode. He became an advocate for pilot health awareness, working with airline medical departments to educate fellow pilots about recognizing signs of cardiac distress and the importance of not ignoring physical symptoms while on duty. The Boeing 767 involved in the emergency continued in service for several more years before retirement, but it was specially designated within the airline fleet, with recognition of the successful emergency landing. Many crew members requested to work on this particular aircraft, considering it a symbol of professional excellence and successful crisis management. The aircraft's maintenance records included notation of its role in the dramatic medical emergency. Denver International Airport implemented enhanced training programs for their emergency response teams based on lessons learned from the Flight 2847 incident. The coordination between aviation authorities, medical personnel, and hospital facilities became a model replicated at airports worldwide. The successful response demonstrated how proper preparation and training could make the difference between tragedy and triumph in aviation emergencies. The passengers of Flight 2847 formed an informal association, staying in contact through social media and organizing occasional reunions. Many credited the experience with giving them greater appreciation for the professionalism of airline crews and the complex coordination required for safe commercial aviation. Several passengers pursued careers in emergency services or aviation, inspired by what they had witnessed during the crisis. Aviation medical authorities used the incident to develop improved protocols for handling medical emergencies involving essential crew members during flight. The case study influenced policy changes regarding pilot medical monitoring and the procedures for situations where a captain becomes incapacitated during critical phases of flight. Training programs for co-pilots were enhanced to ensure readiness for such scenarios. Sarah's recognition of the early warning signs through Captain Chen's unusual coffee consumption pattern became a frequently cited example in medical and aviation training programs. Her persistence in monitoring his condition, despite his initial resistance to acknowledging a problem, demonstrated the crucial role that flight attendants play in passenger and crew safety beyond their traditional service responsibilities. The story of Flight 2847 was eventually featured in aviation safety publications and documentaries, serving as an inspirational example of how training, teamwork, and quick thinking can overcome seemingly impossible situations. The incident reinforced the importance of having comprehensive emergency protocols and the value of every crew member understanding their role in crisis management. Years later, all the principal figures in the dramatic emergency continued to work in their respective fields, carrying with them the lessons learned from that intense day when professional training, personal courage, and teamwork combined to save lives at 35,000 feet. The memory of those critical hours when a simple request for coffee evolved into a life-or-death situation remained a powerful reminder of how quickly situations can change and how important it is to be prepared for the unexpected in aviation and in life.